The letter had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 3 days when Marcus came through the back door smelling like diesel and dry grass. I hadn't touched it. I knew the name on the return address, Callaway and Briggs, Attorneys at Law, Pueblo, Colorado. I knew what was folded inside. You know the way you know a drought is coming, not from a forecast, but from the way the soil starts pulling away from the fence posts. My father-in-law, Raymond Castor, was standing in my living room for the first time in 4 years. His attorney was beside him. My mother-in-law, Diane, was pressing a tissue to the corner of her eye with the careful precision of someone who had practiced the gesture. And my husband, Cole, was standing at the far wall with his back to the room, still as a post set in concrete. Then Raymond said, "Open it," and Cole turned around. My name is Elena Reyes Castor. I am the co-owner and primary operator of Ironbend Ranch, a 980-acre working cattle operation in Pueblo County, Colorado. I run a cow-calf herd of 210 Angus Cross cattle, a working quarter-horse program with a 6-month wait list, and a hay leasing operation that services 4 neighboring farms. I have run this ranch for 8 years. I poured the foundation of the equipment barn myself with 2 seasonal workers and a concrete mixer I rented from a hardware store in Walsenburg. Before I met Cole, I had a ranch management degree from Colorado State University and a credit file that made lenders return my calls. My parents came from Sonora with a used pickup truck and a single rule: what is yours, you built. Cole's grandmother, Nettie Castor, understood that completely. Nettie was 79 when I first met her. She lived alone in a small cottage at the eastern edge of the Ironbend property, keeping a garden of green beans and peppers and a collection of barn cats she had named after old country singers. She had slow, deliberate eyes and a way of listening that made you feel your words were being weighed carefully before she responded. She called Raymond the man of the hour, the way you'd call a thunderstorm inconvenient. He had moved her to the cottage when he inherited the main house. He told the rest of the family she preferred her independence. She told me, over coffee on my 3rd visit, that Raymond had wanted the dining room table and everything around it. I brought her lunch every Friday: pozole, red enchiladas, chicken and green sauce. A pot of birria once that she finished over 5 days and described as the first thing that had genuinely pleased her in years. She had taught Cole to read cattle when he was 8 years old. Raymond had never once driven out to that cottage without wanting something in return. The event was a Labor Day gathering at the main house. Raymond and Diane had hosted it for years, the kind of annual tradition that was less a celebration than a formal accounting of loyalty. You attended or you explained yourself. Cole told me we didn't have to go. He said it the way you warn someone about a slick road, as information, not direction. I told him we should go, not for Raymond, for Nettie. Diane called with the invitation. Warm and smooth as a hotel recording. Dawson and Elena, naturally. So lovely. Oh, don't bring a thing. Then a pause. Although if Elena wanted to bring something from her background, everyone would just adore it. She meant food. She always meant food when she said it that way. I had built up a considerable reserve of patience for that particular phrasing, and I used it now. I made my grandmother's pozole rojo. 7 pounds of pork shoulder, dried guajillo, and pasilla chiles. Hominy the way my grandmother used it, from the can, because that is how she made it, and I will not apologize for what works. It took 4.5 hours. It fed 14 people. It was the best thing on that table. And 2 of Raymond's brothers told me so unprompted, which I noted and stored away. Nettie was settled in her lawn chair at the edge of the patio, dressed in a pale yellow blouse with her good earrings in. She took my hand when I sat beside her. She said, "You didn't have to come." I said, "I know." She looked at the pot of pozole. "You made the red one." I did. She held the bowl in both hands for a long moment before eating. Then she said quietly, "He's going to ask you something tonight. Don't let him dress it up as fairness. It is not fairness." I didn't ask her to explain. I thought I understood what was coming. I was wrong about the details. It happened after dinner in the kitchen, with 6 family members present and the side door open to the sound of Raymond's brothers laughing in the yard. Raymond had a talent for choosing his moments. Enough witnesses to confirm him, not enough to shield you. He said he had been thinking about legacy. He said Ironbend had been Castor land for 3 generations. He acknowledged that Cole and I had invested substantially in its development. Then he said he felt it was only right that the original family hold a meaningful stake in what the ranch had become. A partnership arrangement, half ownership, 50%. The kitchen went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. I want to be precise about what Raymond was asking. He was asking for half of a ranch that Cole and I had purchased from Nettie, with her blessing, at a documented fair market price 8 years ago. A ranch I had spent nearly a decade expanding, refinancing, and building into a working operation appraised at just under $4 million. He had contributed nothing to its development. He had in fact argued against the original sale, insisting the land should be listed with a developer out of Colorado Springs. His attorney was present at a family cookout. He had brought a lawyer to a holiday gathering. I looked at Cole. Cole looked at his father. I said, "We'll need some time to think it over." Raymond's expression shifted in a way that told me something. He had expected a fight. He had rehearsed for resistance. My calm answer put him off balance, and in that gap I saw something honest in him, something small and uncertain. He was not sure he deserved what he was asking for. That lasted perhaps 2 seconds before his face closed over it again. Diane said, "This is a family matter." Nettie appeared in the kitchen doorway. No one had heard her stand up. She looked at her son without speaking for a moment. Then she looked at me. She said, "A family matter and a business matter are not the same thing." Raymond told her she didn't fully understand the situation. She said she understood it better than anyone else in that room. He told her to go back outside. She did, slowly, and she pressed her hand against my arm as she passed me. Cole turned from the wall. He said one sentence, and I want you to understand that it was not loud, not sharp, not rehearsed. It arrived the way something arrives that has been true for a long time and is only now being spoken aloud. This ranch belongs to Elena, and I believe you already know what Grandma put in the title. The attorney's pen stopped. Raymond's mouth opened. We left shortly after. Cole fed the horses when we got home. I washed the pozole pot. We did not talk much. The next morning I was out before 5:30 to check the east pasture where the wire had been giving. By 7, I had replaced 11 feet of fencing and was back inside making coffee. That is what the next 4 years looked like. Raymond ended contact with Cole. The reality of it was more administrative than dramatic. A borrowed utility trailer was returned without a phone call. Holiday invitations stopped arriving. Diane called twice in the first year, both times saying she missed Cole, both times circling back to ask whether our position had changed. It had not. She stopped calling. A cousin named Derek sent a message through social media implying we were being unreasonable. Cole responded briefly and without anger. Derek did not write again. Nettie came to live with us in the summer of the second year. She had fallen in the cottage and been on the floor for 2.5 hours before she could reach her phone. No one in Raymond's household had checked on her. Cole drove out, helped her pack a bag, and brought her home. I turned the spare room into hers and moved the ranch paperwork to the barn office. The arrangement cost us an extra $300 a month for morning help on the days I was out early. I did not consider it a burden. Nettie was good company. She knew this land in ways I was still learning. She knew where the north field went alkaline in dry years, which corner of the property had a buried survey marker her husband had set in 1965, which doors swelled in February. On cold mornings, she sat at the kitchen table while I cooked, and sometimes she talked, and sometimes she was quiet, and both felt easy. She kept a flat cedar box on her dresser, dark reddish wood with a small brass latch, about the length of a man's forearm. I never asked about it. She never explained it. I noticed she checked it the way some people check a clock, a quick glance, a small private confirmation that something was still in its place. One evening, I was making red enchiladas at the stove, dried New Mexico chiles pressed and soaked because Nettie had opinions about shortcuts. and she came and stood beside me. She watched me lay the tortillas flat in the skillet. She said, "My husband taught me to make these." I said my grandmother had taught me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He would have liked you." I pressed the tortilla flat and let the silence hold the answer. I heard the cedar box open and close softly behind me as she walked back to the table. She began slowing in the third winter, less appetite, long afternoons sleeping in the chair by the window. She had a good stretch in February and then a week in March that wasn't. One morning before daylight, I found her sitting alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The cedar box was on the table in front of her. I sat down across from it. She looked at me and said, "I took care of it already." I said, "I know." Though I only half understood what she meant, she said, "Raymond will call it unfair. He'll lean on that word." She paused to breathe. "You tell him," she said, "that fair is what a person earns." She passed on a quiet Thursday in April with Cole at her side. I stayed in the kitchen and made pot soleil. The letter from Calloway and Briggs arrived 5 weeks later, addressed to Cole and me jointly, requesting we schedule a meeting at their offices in Pueblo. No explanation given. I scheduled it for a Friday morning. We arrived to find Raymond and Diane already seated at the conference table, along with Raymond's attorney and an unfamiliar man who turned out to be a certified public accountant. The senior partner, a woman named Patricia Briggs with steel gray hair and steady hands, sat at the head of the table. She placed 3 documents face down on the surface and then explained that Nettie Joan Castor, age 84, had executed a revised last will and testament 13 months before her death. The document had been properly notarized, witnessed, and filed with the county. It was no surprise to this firm. It was, however, clearly a surprise to Raymond, who sat with both hands flat on the table and very still. Patricia Briggs turned over the first document. Nettie's savings, $68,000, divided equally among her 3 grandchildren, Cole among them. She turned over the second document. The cedar box, meaning its full contents, had been bequeathed specifically to me, Elena Reyes Castor, by name. Raymond's hands moved on the table. She turned over the third document. This is where the room changed entirely. The deed to Ironbend Ranch, the original deed that Cole and I had purchased from Nettie 8 years prior, had contained since its original drafting by Nettie's late husband Earl Castor in 1981, a single protective clause, a reversion clause, standard language used in agricultural estate planning. If the land were ever transferred to a party outside of direct lineal descent or surviving spouse, Nettie retained the right to reclaim the title. Raymond had known about this clause. He had in fact been the one to encourage his parents to include it 3 decades ago as a protection against outside developers. The clause had never been triggered because Cole was direct lineal descent and the land had remained within the family. But what Raymond had never been told, what Nettie had never disclosed, was that 12 years ago she had quietly amended her own position in that clause through this same firm. She had transferred her reversion right jointly and irrevocably to Cole, and to any spouse of Cole's, which meant to me, Raymond said, "That cannot be legal." His attorney placed a hand on his arm. He pulled it away. Diane covered her mouth. Beside her, Derek, who had apparently come for support, had gone a pale, uncertain color. He was staring at the table rather than at us. Something in him had already grasped what this meant, and he was ashamed of it. I noticed that. I chose not to use it. Patricia Briggs explained the rest. The reversion clause that Raymond himself had insisted on 30 years ago to guard Castor land from outside buyers now protected it entirely from him. Any legal challenge Raymond brought would require him to argue that the clause his own parents created at his own urging was invalid. He had constructed the very mechanism that locked him out. He had done it with his own hands, decades before any of this began. I reached into my bag and set the cedar box on the conference table. I opened the latch. Inside, the original amendment documents, Nettie's copy, signed and dated. Beneath them, a photograph of Earl Castor standing in front of the old equipment barn, the one I had replaced with the structure I built myself in the 3rd year. On the back of the photograph, in Nettie's handwriting, the words, "What belongs to you, you earned." I said, "She asked me to tell you something." Raymond looked up. "Fair is what you earn," I said. We did not pursue any legal action beyond that meeting. We did not need to. Raymond's attorney sent a written assessment 2 weeks later advising that any challenge to the reversion transfer would cost more than it could possibly recover and would almost certainly fail in court. We received that letter, read it, and filed it. Cole called his father once, about 3 weeks after the meeting. He invited him to dinner. Not to negotiate anything, not to revisit any of it, simply to share a meal. Raymond declined. His exact words, passed through Diane, were that he did not think he could sit at that table yet. That was his choice. We left it with him. Diane sends a card at Christmas now. Cole writes back, "I don't, but I don't interfere with it either." Derek called one evening late and said he was sorry, without specifying exactly what for. Cole thanked him and they talked for nearly an hour about a quarter horse Derek was considering buying. That was the end of it. The ranch is the ranch. The east pasture fence gets checked every week. The hay operation added a 4th lease farm this year, which brought in an additional $16,000 in annual income. The quarter horse program has more requests than it can take. Nettie's dresser is still in the spare room, which is a guest room again now. The cedar box sits on top of it, empty except for the photograph of Earl Castor and the note written on its back. Every Friday morning, before the ranch work begins, I make pozole. Not for any occasion in particular, because it takes 4 hours and it requires your attention, and it fills the whole house with the smell of dried chiles and slow-cooked meat. Because my grandmother made it. Because Nettie loved it. Because the land outside the window is mine, and it always was. That is the inheritance, not the acreage, not the deed, not the number on the appraisal. It is knowing what you built and being still enough to sit with it. Every one of us has a Nettie, someone who believed in what we were made of before we could see it ourselves. Don't wait to check on that person. Call today. Show up. Bring something if you can. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment with one word that describes Nettie. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment to do it. Every story on this channel is already waiting for you.